All right, welcome Web18. This is our final day together. Oh, baby, we've made it so far. Think about your first day together, and we were like talking about HTML. our first day was like, here's an A tag, here's the HT, and now we're like making freaking components. Look at you. So proud of you. It's not easy to get this far. I'm sure that there has been tears along the way, like just frustration tears, anger tears. So thank you for sticking with us, getting this far. There's much more to come with build weeks and React, backend, labs, computer science, career, job. One of the best things I saw, if you haven't been to the hashtag hired, put in here, hired, that channel is full of good stuff because it shows students that have gone through the system before you and probably with less than you, by the way. Like we've gotten better. You're getting the best iteration of us right now. And it's still not perfect, as you know, even from the training kit this morning. Ooh. But you're still here. We're still getting through it. I want to talk about Alan High for a second. Alan, he was a former student of mine, of course. And he had a dream to go work at the company that he actually just got a job at. And that doesn't always happen. And that shouldn't be like the expectation, honestly, because life is just not that way. But my gosh, Alan did it. But what did he do? He busted his tail. He worked so hard. He got in contact with the people that he wanted to work at and said, what do I need to do? Like he was so good early. So if you've got that company that you're eyeing right now, if you've got that dream in front of you somewhere, go look right now at the bullet points of what they want. And that should be what you're doing, after your assignments are done. You should be pushing yourself right now to try to get there. And just start Googling the weird stuff that they have in their bullet points. So by the time you get to it in a couple months, you'll go kill it. SpaceX, do it. If they've got a web developer position open or whatever it is, go look at the requirements, do it. For me, it was Blizzard Entertainment. That was my big thing. I have a sad story about that, though, because I actually got an offer from them. And it was awful. I won't talk about specific numbers. But basically, I went to BlizzCon. I interviewed at the booth, passed all their interviews, got into phone interviews, started talking about compensation for a front-end engineer position on the BattleNet team. And it was so bad compared to what I needed to support my family. It was bad. In Irvine, California. I was just like, oh my gosh. And so I had 2 kids at the time and my wife, and we discussed it, and it was the saddest thing to be like, it's not the thing we should do for our family right now. It was like, I remember crying about it. Because what did they say? Well, they said, we've got 1,500 qualified people behind you wanting to get into this position. And I couldn't barter. I couldn't negotiate. It was a hardcore leveling system, in their own system of just like levels and things. And there's nothing I could do about it. So I had to like put my tail between my legs and turn the offer down and go work for a company nobody's ever heard of, to support my family. And I do regret that a little bit, honestly. I kind of wish I would have taken that adventure back then, but I would not be here if I didn't do that. So, but I think it's an interesting story because I thought it was going to be this amazing thing when I logistically couldn't do it. And that blew my mind. I never thought that'd be an issue. But there's responsibilities we have as humans to support our families and, have a roof over our head. So I want to make sure that you understand that now, getting everything taken care of and working. And by the way, I've worked with amazing people. Like it didn't hurt me It hurt my branding, sure, but it didn't hurt my skills. So just keep that in the back of your mind, that you might have that true north that you think is where you want to go, and then you all of a sudden take this weird bypath and it ends up being the best thing in the world. All right, little life advice on our last day. So components, day 2, tab navigator. This is going to be our guided project. Remember, the first thing I always talk about is what? It's HTML structure, right? It's going through this thing and trying to figure it out. Now you can see here, I've got a missing div. Probably when I copied it over here. That's why you check the structure. So make sure all your divs are closed. By the way, there are tools for doing that. If you don't have them built into VS Code, there are linters that protect you from yourself. So hopefully you've got those enabled. But in this case, I've got this container home that's holding header and my section tag. So we come over here, header, H1, nav, looking good. Okay. Come in here, section tag. So you can see I've got custom data attributes, rock, p tag, tab navigator. Okay. So in this point right here, I've basically got this structure that I can start building on, right? Nothing smart, just like yesterday. We're clicking all these things, nothing's happening. So the next thing we do is look at the CSS. We've got our box sizing border box, our HTML, font size with rems. We've got our general styles. This one's actually in less this time. We've got our nested home tag. So anything in this home tag is going to be saved for later. The tab navigator, this is something I actually would like to abstract out though, right? Because we want to keep it as a component. So that's something I want to do in the future here, because I want you to understand that tab navigator, after we're done with it, could be plopped into anywhere, regardless of the home page or general styles, okay? So if we look at our tab navigator, by the way, I like to always have a little space there. Just helps me identify my nesting, and because white space ultimately gets removed when you're running a cleanup script that just gets rid of all the extra spacing. So I like to have as much space as I can have while I'm developing, just to get those visual gutters. That really helps as you're developing, to have some space to think. I'll explode things out big time when I'm working on something. Like I'll do that sometimes while it's kind of like I've talked about this before, you know, the surgeon table. You want to make sure that you're only focusing on the thing that you need to have the work done on. Don't look at everything else. You'll get distracted. Okay. So if we look at the CSS, you notice there's something interesting here. We're going to come back to that shortly, but I want to like kind of tease it here. That's an interesting new selector we haven't seen yet. And we'll come down to tab content, content change. So there's a display block happening. So that indicates that there's something hidden going on here. So if I open up my tab navigator, I want you to notice that I have a tab links portion, 1, 2, 3, 4. So these are links. And then there's a whole tab content section that's being hidden. Oh, okay, that's interesting. So if we come over here and we can see tab content, 1-to-1 here. Here's our tab content. Here's our tab content, right? And notice that as we open this up, there are actually content tabs in here matching the links, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And there's a display none that's kind of messing everything up, right? On purpose. So if you see here, this is what it actually looks like when it's all exploded. This should look very similar to the newsfeed experience you had yesterday, where it was just exploded. And then you have to like use CSS to hide it. So there you go. Pretty crazy how display none now has way more importance with JavaScript, right? Probably the first time when you learned it, you're like, when am I going to display none anything? And now it's like your best friend when you want to like hide and show things in JavaScript. So it's funny how these little properties become so important later on in programming. Okay, so now we know what's going on. We need to show the content section on a click, right? So tab 1, click, and then we want to show tab 1's content. So this is a little bit different than yesterday in a big way. So we have the open and close toggle button, right? Well, this thing's going to be showing different tabs that need to match the content. Okay, so let's go into our JavaScript and let's start thinking about how we start building this thing out. So do you remember what step 1 is? What is step one of getting our content on the page? So grab the element, but which element are we grabbing? What's the thing that we're going to be adding an event listener to eventually? That's right, the link. So if we look at our HTML, what's the class that we should probably grab? Well, it's literally called link, so I won't make you repeat it. But yeah, that's right. So what do? Well, we do this. We set up a const, links, assign the value of, and then we use our document object, right? And then we use our method, query selector all. And we know that query selector all returns what? What type of data structure does it return? A node list. Well, be careful. It's a node list. It's not an array proper, but it is array-like. So I just want to make sure that you understand that, Will, and anybody else that thought an array came back, because it doesn't. It's kind of like this half-baked array called a node list. All right, and then we talked about link being passed in, right? Because we want to get these links right here. All right, let's see if we got what we think we got. Console.log. And instead of going crazy and looking at the whole, well, let's look at it one more time just so we can see that node list in action. Know that it's a node list. Go to our console here. It's auto running. I got to turn that off because I hate that. I want to hit the run button myself and control my fate. All right, here we go. There it is, the node list in all of its glory. So it's array-like, meaning we have our 0 indices, 1, 2, 3, right? It has a length property. Those are both array-like. But then as we open up our Dunder Proto, we can see the inheritance that we received from our actual prototype. And we're getting like what? For each, entries, all these things are built into node list. And again, the way you can find these things out, just to repeat ourselves, so it's like so annoying. MDN node list, like it should just be built into our brains to try to read documentation as soon as we need to. And of course, go look at the properties and methods. There's the for each, receives a callback, just like a normal array method does. Okay. So we've been using array methods pretty much every day in some way, shape, or form since last week. We've used them on Monday when we gave that example of the creating elements. We used them on Tuesday when we were looping through elements. We used them on Wednesday when we did all the walkthrough yesterday. Like that was all for each doing that, and today again. So you've been exposed to array methods pretty much every day, or at least since you've been exposed to them. They've been on your mind either in code challenges or here. So array methods don't go away. They just get used even more. So if you're still struggling with array methods, it's time to spend a little extra study time at night. Go back to the training kit on array methods. Go watch the video again. Like to go back to the basics, and it'll be enlightening now that you've had a couple of days to think about it. Okay, so we've got our node list. We now know with our node list that we can run a method on it called for each, right? Because we just saw it. So for each is available to node lists. And then thinking about our array methods, we pass in a callback function, right? And in that callback function, we get the current value. And so if we were to console log current value, like hopefully you're just like, oh my gosh, Josh, yes, we did this yesterday. Why are we repeating it? I hope you feel that way. I'm not even kidding. I hope that you're just like kind of bored of how good you understand this. That'd be an amazing thing for me if that's how you felt. So tab 1, tab 2, tab 3, tab 4. So each one of these links, just to show you for sure, they're coming through. Now, again, we talked about this yesterday, where I think it's a great thing to start thinking in what you've got instead of like current value. So we've got a link, right? So it makes sense to call it that. Let's just make sure we have the same thing. We know nothing's changed. Link, link, link. There they are. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now that we've got these 4 links inside of our for each, we are now prepared to make a new object so they can do something else. So to make a new object, we know that we can use a constructor, which we can also use the class syntax. So step one is get our DOM elements and create a new object from them. So to create a new object from them, we've got to be able to use that new keyword, right? So we use, say, return, because the return will return it back to the live DOM. We'll use the new keyword so that we get a new object that's smarter. And also it binds a new this keyword to the object. And then we're going to say what? We could say link with a capital L, and then we could pass in the value of link. Like we could do something like that. So that's step one. I mean, you could say step one is get the node list. Step two is loop through the, I mean, if we're going to be really steppy. Step two is iterate over the node list and create a new object. Over here would be get our elements. I think that's all we're doing. And store them in links. There we go. So I think it's better to be a little bit more specific. Now, you would think that step three would be down here normally, or like step three, right? But we learned that we can't do that if we use the class syntax. Why is that again? That's right. The non-hoisting of a class, but it's because of hoisting. So I think that's great you're saying that. So we come in here, step three, define our class that will create a new object. So we're going to say class, and we're going to call it link. Why do we uppercase that stuff? Why do we do that stupid uppercasing? Does it make sense? Ah, yes, convention. So letting the next developer know, hey, I'm building a class. This is going to be used in a certain way, reusable object. Okay. So within our class, we have two portions. We have a constructor portion, constructor, and then we have a methods portion. And because I don't have any methods yet, you know, I don't need to worry about it. So that's why I'm just using a comment instead. Constructor, man, that's another word. If you look at it too long, it starts to turn into something else. So our link is receiving what? It's receiving each one of these one by one through the iteration, right? So to receive it, remember parameters can be shama lama yama jabba jabba jabba, and as long as I'm consistent, they will work. So if I come down here and say console.log shama lama yama 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 yama, let's see the difference here. So let's see, I got rid of my console logs. Okay, cool. Let's see what happens. Save and run. There they are. There's my 4 links. Everything worked. Everything's getting built into a new object. Hopefully this ridiculous name helps you understand the parameter names do not freaking matter. Got to make sure we beat that into our heads now, because it's going to get way weirder in life if you don't know that, because it's all about order, not the name. But because we don't want to have to remember writing that crazy thing out, we're going to say link. Okay. So we're passing in our link. We know that it's just these 4 links. And we're now prepared to start going through something new and getting these information pieces. Okay, I want to stop here and say, are there any questions that I can help? Let me go to the questions thread. Okay, do you always use display none when hiding and unhiding your items? Do you ever use visibility hidden? If not, why? Let me answer that question. If you ever need to maintain the content, meaning the white space that the content's in, visibility hidden. If you don't need to maintain the white space the content's in, display none. That's it. That's the 2 rules. So that means if I wanted to, let me show you what the difference would be. So if I come down here and make like an H1, testing, hit run, you can see testing is the bottom of these tabs. Well, if I said display none, if I said, instead of this, I said visibility hidden, Jeez. Save and run. Watch what happens. This thing gets bumped all the way down there, and we get this weird block, actually, because of the background of tab content. So there's a huge difference between visibility hidden and display none, and the difference is white space and whether it takes it up or not. So visibility hidden is not what we want. Display none is what we want because of the white space. I think it's a great question, though. As well, say for the nav menu from yesterday, would you ever use margin left and negative 400 px instead of display none? No, I would never do that because there's no reason to like mess up your layout like that when display none. Just removes it from the white space. So it's all about white space. Omar, great questions. The answer is white space for everything. For those questions. Okay, Darren says, a strange bug that me and my PM group found out yesterday is that query selector returns null while using Quokka.js. But when you turn it off, query selector works fine. Interesting. Yeah, Quokka.js, I can't speak to them. I have found a couple bugs in my own development. So do be careful to always make sure, like as your last resort, Darren and anybody else, to go look at the browser's console. Like that's the truth teller compared to all the other fun stuff. Quokka is a great tool for learning and for seeing numbers. You don't have to jump to the console, but if you do run into those bugs, jump to the browser. I think that's really great, though. William said, never mind, found the answer. Awesome. Tracy says, when using toggle, the on-state CSS uses display block. Won't that wipe out our display flex? And Ben says, you can change it from display block to display flex, but yes, it'll overwrite the original display flex property if that's the original, which is true. So we'll see how that works. Great questions, everybody. Good stuff. Okay. Any other questions regarding what we've done so far? Is there anything that's messing with your mind? Is there something that just does not make sense right here? We've taken the link, we've thrown it into a node list, we iterated over the node list. In our iteration, we used a return statement to return a new link back. We then created a new link class. And in the constructor, we received the link, and now we're console logging each individual iteration. Okay. All right, so by the way, if you are listening to me right now, and you're a little bit nervous because you do have a question, but you're like, nobody else is asking questions. Please freaking ask the question. You're here to learn. Like, don't be scared. Okay. Let's move on. So console.log link. We've got our links. Oh, let me get rid of that weird testing thing. That was fun for the second. Yes. Chad says it perfectly. Ask your questions. You're paying a lot of money for this. I agree with that sentiment. All right. So if we go into our link constructor, we've now got some other interesting questions to address. So in our link constructor, we need to be able to grab the tab content that we can't see right now. So if you recall, this display none, again, maybe I should just leave it off till we get to it. But we're trying to grab the matching tab content. So tab 1 to tab 1. It's not matching. Or these are matching. I don't want to be able to click on tab 1 and then tab 2 show up, right? So this is a little tricky because now I've got these two pieces that are comparing against each other. Before, we could just easily go through like yesterday with our accordion. And remember how we did it? We query selected into the element was already on. So it was really easy. But these are separate elements now. So notice what's going on here. We have different div structures. That's pretty crazy. Whereas yesterday it was nested, so we could just query selector inside and it was easy. Today we've got separate divs. So we've got to figure out how to do this. Well, it's in the training kit, one of the few good things in the training kit on this day. I wish there were more videos and content. We'll get there. But was the data attributes. So data attributes are this really, really cool feature in JavaScript and HTML combo kind of thing, and CSS even, where you can actually put in a custom data attribute, and you can name it whatever the heck you want as long as you're consistent. The thing is, it's got to be data dash in front of it. That's the only gotcha. You've got to put data dash. If you do that, the browser knows and will follow the rules that you say afterwards. So if you look at this example here, we've got div data dash school lambda, right? And so you can see how we can actually use CSS to select this. This is pretty crazy looking selector. Notice that we had to say div right here. I mean, we didn't have to say div, but in this case, data dash school lambda is one-to-one matching with the attribute name, okay? So it's pretty interesting because then we can use a property in JavaScript called data set. And data set grabs the custom data attribute off the HTML, okay? So let's go see how this works. Remember in my CSS, I had a class down here, right there, where I was messing around with data dash tab. So I have to go put it on the link. So here's my link right there. And it's not inside the class. It's a separate attribute. So class is an attribute. We're going to make a custom data attribute. So data dash tab. And by the way, I could call this whatever I want, but I'm going to call it tab because it makes sense that I'm going to be toggling tabs. And so I'm going to say assign the value of, and then of course I can do a 1. So if we go back over here, you can see it looks just like that. Data school, assignment operator, string. Okay. Notice they are strings. So even if you put a number in here, that's still considered to be a string. So be careful. You might look at that and think, oh, it's a number 1. No, it's a string that says 1. So be careful. Okay, so with data tab 1, we now have this custom data attribute. Now, I could very easily see, if you haven't asked questions yet, just thinking out loud here, why would you want a custom data attribute when you have CSS, classes, and IDs? Well, it's kind of interesting because CSS can be used for multiplication of ideas, like dry, don't repeat yourself kind of coding, right? So you write one class and hopefully it solves 14 to 100 problems with one class. Whereas IDs are like one unique ID per page is semantically allowed. So then that means you're only allowed to have one uniquely named ID per page. So it's kind of the opposite of classes, right? Super specific. So the problem is there's no middle ground sometimes between the two. Well, this is truly a middle ground because you can give them unique names that won't interfere with classes, but are not as specific IDs. So they're kind of like between IDs and classes in their use case. I will tell you this, more often than not, JavaScript developers use them for JavaScript and not for styling things. So just like in general, that's what they're used for. But you can use them to style things. So if we open this up, let me uncomment this. And you can see we're on link. And then we have our data tab 1. So let's see what that looks like when I run it. It goes red. So it does indeed work. By the way, on a specificity level, if all things are equal, these are going to be more specific than a class, less specific than an ID, if you were looking at that waterfall cascade in your mind. So that is a data attribute, a custom data attribute on the HTML and CSS level. But how do we get this thing done on a JavaScript level? Well, let's go down here. We've got a console.log with our link, right? So we could say this.link, assign the value of link, just so we've got it. So we could say this.link, dot, and then we could say dataset. So the dataset, if you recall, our training kit here, talks about how we have to use dataset property in a specific way. So you have to say dataset dot, and then the name of the second portion of the dash here. So these have to match up. So dataset is just the data dash. School is the thing that you're going to dot into. So in our case, what is the dataset? Like what is the dot after the data set? That's right, it's tab, because after the dash tab, there it is. So we say tab like that. Okay, let's see if we can console log this. So we'll come down here, pop this in, see if there's anything that pops in. Now we only have one set, so let's see if this throws an error or anything else. So clear, save, and run. This is actually really cool to see. So it's saying on the first div, we had a 1, but the other 3 divs were undefined. Well, it's pretty clear why they were undefined, because they don't exist, right? But it didn't throw an error because the compiler still tried to find them and couldn't put anything there. So that's fine. But this is really cool to see, to show, here's our data tab. So let me introduce another data tab. Come in here and we'll say 2. Now let's run the same code. Clear, say, oh, not fork. Oh no, that's not what I wanted to do. Save, clear. Oh man, everything. That fork button. Okay, come back here. Data set tab 2. Okay, save and run. Look at that. So there's our 1, there's our 2. Pretty cool. And then our undefines make sense because they don't have anything. So let's keep going down the line. And let's make them uniquely named. Then run this code one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's pretty cool. Okay, let me see if there's any questions about data, custom data attributes. Could you use school, data, lambda school, lambda? Question answered. Okay, you got it. Omar says, does the order of data attributes in class in HTML matter? Do we state class first or data attribute? It does not matter. Great question. Can the data attribute be added to the HTML element with JavaScript? You could, yeah, you totally could, if you wanted to. Let's see. Okay, cool. Good questions. Everything else is a comment. So with those data attributes in mind, let's see. I want to give you 5 minutes. Take this code, and I want you to mess around with these data attributes. Change the names, see what you could do with them. Just see a one-to-one difference. Go change these out. 5 minutes, go play around with data attributes. So I'll give you the code. You ready? Steady. Data attributes. Okay, 5 minutes. Go goof around with them. Okay. So in the last 5 minutes, you've gone through and you were messing with custom data attributes. Are there any questions that you came up with while you did that? Let's see a couple questions in thread. Let's see. So data set always starts with data. Well, so Mary, let's be more specific. I love that question. It actually starts with data dash. That's like a better way to answer that. But yes, they always start with data dash, and then the second portion is up to you. So you can't do that. That won't make sense. You got to do data dash for the browser to be able to parse that. Okay, so that's a great question. Austin says, why exactly do we need brackets to access the attribute again? And so you were talking about the CSS selector. Where did I go? There you are. Where are you? Where did my, there it is. Okay. So the brackets, this is just the syntax of why. So Austin, this is just because the rules said so. There's not like a rhyme or reason. I'm not on the committee that made the rules. But syntactically, this is why they did that. So you just got to memorize that. Looks kind of like an array, but it's got the data dash tab inside of it. Okay? Awesome. Okay, I think our brains are in a good mushy state. So let's take a 5-minute breather. And we'll come back, answer any questions you have, and keep going forward. So 5 minutes, step away from the computer. right, break time is over. Come on back. I'll answer some of the questions I saw come in the thread. For example, some good questions coming in from Tyler saying, still not sure why I would use data set versus just looping over the class link. So in this case, well, we haven't got there yet, Tyler. So I understand why it's like, why would we do that? So we'll get there in a second. Steve says, so we use data dash to work with multiple elements and query selector for one. Well, data dash is used just as another tool for selection. So just put data dash in its own little realm of like, okay, it's not quite an ID, so it's not one per page. It's not, it's not a class and its usage. So for example, let me show you again, Bootstrap and how they use data dash. So if we go to components, go to carousel, now that we've got this in our mind, you're going to be like, whoa, I didn't see that yesterday. So if we look over here, look at that. Data dash ride carousel. And so if we were to go look at Bootstrap's documentation, so if we go over here, hit this download button. Source files, CDN. Okay, let's go look at the CDN. Let's go grab this and pop it in here. Get rid of the min and get the full Bootstrap. Okay, so let's see how exactly they use it. So if we come over here, you see data dash ride. Well, let's go see if they have it in their JavaScript. And there it is. Isn't that cool? So Bootstrap is using data dash ride as a specific way to grab the carousel and then do something with it. And notice what they're doing. They're making new constructors, right? Notice the capitalization. So that's pretty cool. We can see it in the wild, why these things are being used and where they're being used. In one of the biggest libraries and frameworks in the world, in Bootstrap. So coming back here, we can use these data attributes to be very custom about what we want to change versus an ID or class. Yes, you could use a class, by the way. Yes, you could. But data attributes allow you to be just that much more unique and that much more specific. So I don't fault you for thinking, why? But the answer is it's just another level, another abstraction in a selector chain that allows us to just do something totally unique. It's just so nice to have one extra tool as a developer to do that. Okay, how do we assign styles to it in JavaScript? We will talk about that shortly, but spoiler alert, it's the same thing you do here. Looks just like that. Okay. I think everybody else's comments were good. Marina says, can we use different names for data attribute on our links? We can. You can use any name. We're going to match ours up, so you'll see that too. What is that search feature you're using on the browser? Command F. Or if you're on a Mac, Command F. If you're on a PC, Control F. Oh, there it is. Christian just answered. Okay, cool. Great questions. All right, let's keep going down this path. I'm obviously stopping right before I show you something new because I want to make sure that conceptually we're feeling good about what the heck this is doing, because now we're going to actually use it. And so I think that little time is so important. So here's what we're going to do now. We've got two sets of content that are similar in what we want them to do, but they're different in div, right? So tab links is a different div, tab content. So we can bridge the gap quite literally here by creating, matching data attributes with matching string values. So this could be a cool light bulb moment where it's like, whoa, so we're going to say data tab 1 belongs to data tab 1's content. That's pretty cool. I like that. So this is cool because now we can use data attributes as a special indicator that something matches. So by the way, you couldn't do this with IDs, right? ID, tab 1. And then if you tried to do this, it would break, right? It would break the standard. Now you could say, well, okay, that's cool, Josh, but I could also just name the class data tab 1. And I wouldn't fault you. No, that's true. You could do that. But I'm going to show you how easy it is with data attributes, because otherwise we'd have to do class names, what do we have to use? DOM token lists, all sorts of abstractions. Or data set's going to do everything for us. So let's see how that works. So we come down here. This .link is our link. We just console log the data tab, so we know that this is returning, a 1, 2, 3, and 4 string. I'll put this here as a note for us. Actually, I don't want to do that, because if you want to come back to the code later, I don't want to have you wreck it on accident. So 1, 2, 3, 4 is what's being returned by this console log. So now that we know that we've got a 1, 2, 3, and a 4, we now have something to use to compare against the other 1, 2, 3, and 4 between these two pieces of code. So here's how we do it. What we're going to do is we're going to say this dot, and we'll grab tab content. So we'll say this dot content is going to be assigned the value of document dot query selector. All right, so there's our query selector. Notice I'm not using query selector all, right? I'm not trying to get every document piece. I'm trying to get one document piece. Also notice I'm on the document level. I'm not like in our stuff yesterday, we query selected inside the div. In this case, we're going to the document level. So we're starting from the top. And then we're going to go say, well, how do I get data tab 1? Well, here's how we do it. I'm going to go open up some backticks here, and you'll see why in a second. Now, if I just said I want to get the content div, right? Like if we just tried to get the content div, it would grab all 4 content divs every time. That would be too much information. So let's just go see what I mean by that. So this dot content. Let's see what we get here. Save and run. So look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4. We get them all right. But we're trying to grab all of them every time. And that's not something we want. We only want one at a time, not all of them. So with our content div, we go in here and we say, okay, well, let's get the specific one. Let's get just the one that has the matching data tab. So if we follow our syntax here, like let's quite literally copy and paste it here so we know I'm not kidding. There's our selector, right? Like this is just a matching CSS selector. But as you can see, we've got another problem. Let's see what it looks like in our console log. Save and run. Oops. Yeah, there we go. It's grabbing the same thing over and over. Tab 1 content, tab 1 content, tab 1 content, tab 1 content, right? Still not helpful. We need this number, just this one number, to be dynamic, right? Because then we could say 2, 3, or 4. This hard coding stuff is killing us. So how do you think we could get a number? So Ethan has a solution there. It's the string template literal, the interpolation of the value, right? Okay. So if we look at it, and this is crazy looking right here just because it's new syntax. But now we're going to make it a little bit crazier because instead of the 1, we want it to be our dynamic link tab, right? Because remember, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So if we pop it in here and then we wrap it in our escaped syntax here, so $ curly. Now this in effect is 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on the right tab. So if I hit save and run, now look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Perfect. Now we have a 1-to-1 match. So in this case, before we had just the tabs, but now that we're using data dash tab, so we're grabbing the first portion of static, right? It's always going to be named data dash tab. That makes sense. But then we gain dynamacy by accessing the data tab on link, knowing that we made a matching one on tab content. That's sick. So now we're getting a one-to-one. Okay. So at this point, every time we loop through one of these links, we're now getting the matching content with this line of code. That's so cool. All right. Any questions on this matching concept here? Any questions? This looks crazy, right? But if you break it down, it's not that crazy. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, which we just did up here. We just broke that down already. And then this is just the CSS selector, right? That's all it is. We're just following the rules of CSS. Mary says, you kind of lost me. But why do you put dot tab at the end? Is it because it's called data-tab? Yes, that's right. So let's go look at that MDN data set, because I'm sure other people are thinking this too. Let's see, our data attribute, I guess, what it's technically called. So if we look at the syntax, we've already learned it's data dash, data dash, data dash, right? And then the custom name. But if you look at the JavaScript access, so look in this full view, let me draw these two things here. See how it says data dash columns right there? Well, the equivalent JavaScript access looks like that. So data set is the data dash portion. So that's data set. And then the columns is the custom word that we used. So data dash is data set, columns, columns. In our case, it's tab. So if we do it again, data dash right here, data set. Index number, dot index number. Data dash, data set. Dash parent, dot parent. There you go. Darren says, Mary, that one question cleared up a lot. Thank you. So, but Mary, do you feel good about that? I want to make sure you're feeling good about that. Okay. Sarah says, data set grabs the data dash? Yes. That's right, Sarah. Okay. Good. I think we're looking good. All right. So let's go back to our code with this new knowledge in hand. And let's compare notes with our data dash thing again. So if we go over here, you can see it says data dash, right? And then data set, right? So there's data set. Tab, right? And the 3 is what's outputted here by this whole piece, because it's saying this dot link. So this dot link is this whole div. Data set, data dash, tab, and the value turns out to be 3. So that's why this, if we were using that one example, then this would be the number 3 here instead. And if we did the next example up here, it'd be 2, 4, etc. Darren says, and the tab can be called anything when making the data dash thingy. Yep. So we could call this whatever we want, right? Whatever. And if we were consistent, because we're already going, we've already got 8 of these now, then instead of tab, it'd be whatever, right? It's got to match that right side. And so if we ran our code, let's see, what did I mess up with my naming convention? I got to hit save and run probably. Let's see. What am I doing? This dot link dot dataset dot whatever. Oh, it's because of that stupid thing. My bad. So data dash, whatever. There we go. Save and run. Got to be consistent. That's why I said consistency matters. Okay. So I'm going to get rid of the whatevers, but I just wanted to show you can call it whatever you want. But tab does make sense because it's what we're messing with. So clear, save, and run. Sweet. All right. Okay, let's move forward in trying to compare these two, because right now we've got a comparison. We've got the ability to grab the content now. So this .content, remember what we've been logging out this whole time is what? It's the 4 divs of content, right? So we should be able to use them now to show and hide them. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that data display block or none thing. I'm going to bring it back in so we can show and hide things on a toggle. Okay. So I go to my JavaScript. Go ahead and I'll comment this out for later. Now what I've got is I've got my content, right? I've now got content that matches whatever my link is. So with matching content, now I'm prepared to make something new. So again, the content down here is dumb. So let's make a new class. This is something we haven't done yet. So we'll say this .content is now going to be assigned the value of a new content class. That's crazy. Not so crazy, but it's just going to be fun to look at. And then we're going to say pass in this .content. Now you might be going, what? Why would you assign this .content? Blah, blah. Well, if you look down here, we're doing the same thing. We're returning a new link and passing in the link so we can make it smarter and receive it again. So we've got some original content here that can't do much, and we're going to make a new content that can do something else. So now that I've got a new class, I'm going to make a new class called content. All right, because I used the new keyword. So same kind of deal, grab the constructor, and then any methods I might use. And of course, I'll receive something in there. And this probably is going to be like my content, right? Because it's right here. It's getting passed in. So remember, we just console logged this. These are just the 4 tabs that we can't, the 4 content tabs we can't see down here. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're just going to receive it. So we'll say this .content, assign the value of content. Now, probably it can be a little confusing with this .content and this .content. So we could name it something else if we want. So we could say like this .content tab or something to be very specific. So we've got our this .content tab that's unique. So let's console log this and see if we can get to it. There's no other logs. Look at our console, clear it, save it, and run it. Look at that. So these are coming in down here. Now you might be going, wait a second. Aren't we supposed to do extends link, right? No, we're not. This is a more functional paradigm where we're not actually inheriting exactly everything from the class. There is still object-oriented because it came in here, though. But the concept here is that we're not extending, we're not building a proto, we're not building an inheritance chain. We're just using another class for one thing. And so that one thing will be to toggle the class off and on, like the content. So at this point, you can see I've got the 4 tabs, right? So now I can go into my methods and I can say, all right, I want to toggle my content. And so I could say this .content tab, right? Because it's right here, content tab. .class list. .toggle. So, you know, this is all from yesterday. And let's look at what our toggler can do. So I've got a display none, and if I want to display a block, I can use this change class, right? So I come over here and just type in change. So what I've done now is I've basically made the content portion a little bit smarter, and that I'm allowing it to turn off and on with its own toggler. Okay, so change is allowing me to, when everything's said and done, if I make a click event, hide and show these blocks. Now, right now, this isn't doing anything, right? Because the method's not being invoked. So if I say save and run, nothing will happen because this thing's just sitting there. We need to be able to invoke it. Well, guess what? We can invoke it in a method up here in link. So we could come over here and we could say, the method is link clicked. Or let's say, yeah, we'll say link click. It's just a method, sure. And so link click is whenever this link gets clicked. That's the method we'll run, is link click. So in link click, what we're going to do is we're going to grab this .content, which is now a new content piece down here. So we're going to say this dot, and of course, we're going to grab the thing that we made, content. And then what are we going to do? Well, we've got to be able to toggle the content. So we're going to call this method down here. And that's where it gets really crazy cool. So we're going to actually use a method that doesn't exist in link, like properly. Let me make this bigger. Oh man, my code pen's freaking out. Let me refresh the page. Okay. So what we're doing is we're using a method inside of link called link click that its only job really is to toggle the content down here. Now you might be going, why are we doing this? This seems like overkill. Well, it is a little bit overkill just to show you the differences in using classes. Like there is an educational abstraction here that you might be going, this seems like overkill to do this. Like why not just make a method to do this? But what it also shows you is that content is its own portion, the stuff down here. So if I hit save and run, and I click tab 1, let's see if I'm missing anything, or if I have any errors. No errors, okay. Nothing's happening. So let's see what's going on here. Oh, I haven't added event listener. I'm like, what's going on? So I've got an added event listener to my this.link, right? So this.link doesn't even have a click event on it. My bad. So add event listener. Did he spell listener? Listener? Yeah, okay. So that event listener, we're going to pass in our string value, click, which creates a new click event object we know about. We learned yesterday about arrow functions allowing us to not have this keyword bound, so then we can then say this dot link click, so there's no binding issues. And now we should be able to go in here and grab this dot content. So let's see, save and run. There we go. We've got our tab content toggling off and on. Now we don't have it to a point where you can toggle them all off and on. That's going to be for your assignment this afternoon. But for now, this gets the job done and gets you started in the right direction. So great job identifying that event listener, by the way. Now remember, we could do this another way, right? From yesterday. So without the arrow function, we could use the dot bind. Good job, Mary. So dot click, remember, and then we say dot bind, so it knows where this keyword's coming from. So if we get rid of this, save and run, it's the same result. Okay, I want you to be aware of both because both are used. But I want you to be aware of arrows because this is literally one of the only times you could use it effectively. I mean, if you look at the syntax side by side, you're not really saving that much, right? That's why I think arrows are kind of a joke, but again, that's just me. Okay. So that is basically as far as we're going today, using 2 classes. So let me see questions that you might have. Okay, is it better to start with display none or inject it into CSS? It's always better to use the native solution first. So JavaScript is not a native solution. HTML and CSS, native. So if you can do that, do it. Always try to display none without having to override it. So good question. The answer is always try to use your CSS and HTML without JavaScript if you can to do it. Chad says, where are you getting this.link.dataset.tab? Are you just chaining this.link and dataset tab? So this.link.dataset.tab. So remember, this.link, Chad, is just the link, right? So it's this thing right here. So don't focus on all the other things. Focus on this one line of code right here. So this.link is this div. Then .dataset is data dash. And then .tab is the tab. That's where I'm getting this.link.dataset.tab. That's not necessarily chaining. Chaining is with methods. I'm just using a property, right? So the link, this.link, dataset is the data dash. Tab is the tab, and then the result is the number, or the string, I should say, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Okay, shouldn't class be on top of the link class, or does the hoisting not matter in that situation? Ooh, very good question. So the question is asked, and I think a great question. Wait a second, you've been saying hoisting, and now you just put content under here. Well, if you think about what hoisting does, is it takes the function to the top of the scope of when it's being used. So the function definition here, in our case with link, the class link is at the top of the page. But when we say new content, when we try to go grab new content, the reason that this doesn't need to be above it is because the 2-pass compiler has already identified both classes. So link and content have already been identified before this thing ran. And then when it ran, then it can just go down and chunk through. So I love your question. The answer is the compiler, and both classes already were hoisted. Sorry, they're not hoisted. I'm saying they're already at the top of the page before we ran our code down here. So if I put content down here, then we'd have issues, right? But because content's above there, we're good. Great question. But it all matters on when we did the thing and not when we identified the thing. Okay. Darian says, wait, can you explain why we're creating a new class? Yes. So what I want to do here is showcase to you that we can actually chunk down components into individual things that they should do, and that they only do one thing well. So for example, I'm making a link component that only applies to this button here, right? I then have another component called tab component that could do tons more stuff. I just made it do one thing for now, but I could add more methods to this tab component, right, Darian? Like I could come in here and add a button right here that's like expand even further or whatever. I could come up with a new feature. So this is preparing us if we wanted to build even more features on our content component. So part of it's education, just showing you how you could use one component to talk to another component using the new keyword, for example. So like this line right here, this is talking. So it's like, this is creating a new content object using the DOM content object. So the Don content object looks like this, right? It's just a div. It can't do much. Now we're giving that div the ability to toggle itself off or on, right? Display block or display none. So that's why we separated the class out, just to say, look, this is actually a separate component. This is a separate component. So potentially you could have just this class content do one thing really well, which is toggle itself off and on. And this component could do one thing really well, which is define the right tab and add an event listener. So that's why. Oscar says, I keep getting null as my objects. You probably just have a weird reference, Oscar, like I did. So make sure all your names match. If you want to post your code, we could take a look at it. Pat says, so the for each on the links is being reused on content because we are creating new content from within the original constructor link. So the for each on links is being reused on content as we are creating, yes. Yep, we are doing that. Charles says, so I wanted to close tab 1 when opening tab 2. Do I use an if statement? Yes. You could do that. So I'm not going to spoil it for you because it's in your assignment. But you could do something in one of your methods that knocks out everything that currently is displaying block, right? Like you could check everything real quick and say, are you displaying block? If you are, you should display none and then show the new tab. So there is a little if statement in there. Good idea there, Charles. Rod says, why do you call the toggle content inside a class link? What is the significance of that? So the question here is like, why are you doing it here? The significance of that is that the tab link is the only thing that I'm adjusting. And so hypothetically, I could have another element come in here and I could wire it up to be another component that I'm toggling off or on. So like I could make this link reusable over and over and maybe change one line of code if it was a different piece. So that's why it's significant. I'm keeping the add event listener in here. I'm not putting it down here, right? It's on the link. So I could pop anything in here, right? I could do anything I want. But for now, I'm doing a one-to-one with my content. But if I had something else I wanted to toggle, I could do it. Just happens to be in this example, we're using a tab navigator. That's the significance of it. Okay. Can you explain again how link click has access to toggle content? Sure. So link click has access to it because of this line right here. We're creating a new content object before we added the event listener. So this .content got created. We gave ourselves the ability to toggle off this class off and on with toggle content. And then we added an event listener to our link that could then reference this .content. Well, what's this .content? It's right there, right? But it happened so quickly. Went down here, created this new object for us to use. So if we were to console log this .content, let's see what it looks like after we created a new version of it. Save and run. So the log is too big. Look at that. Isn't that really, that's a great question because it led to a really good explanation of what we've done here. In fact, let me show you the before and after. So this .content used to be just the dumb div, right? Just the dead div that didn't have any brains. Then we ran it through a brain making machine and gave it brains. So let's see the before and after of what a brain machine looks like. Which is just a class, right? So we'll say run. This is actually really cool. So up here, we have the dumb div that doesn't have any abilities. Then we gained a smart div that now has a dunder proto that now has a class constructor that now has constructor functions that now, like it has all this stuff that's super smart that can actually be used. And there's the function toggle content, right? That one line of code with that new keyword did all this. So before, div that has no brains. After, a div that now is a JavaScript object that we can use its function toggle content on. So that's exactly how it works, Josh. I think that's great. So before, after. Okay, Oscar posted his code. Let's take a look. Oscar's returning null. So let's start from square one. Const links, assign the value of document query selector all. Link, yep, that looks good. We're then linking, for eaching, functioning, linking, yep, returning new link, perfect. We're coming up to class link. We then have a constructor that receives link. This .link is stored in memory. Okay, this .content is now assigned the value of document query selector. And then we've got content data dash tab. This .link dataset tab. Okay, then you're saying, I want to find out what I've got here. So let's go look at your HTML and see if you've got data tabs in there. So there's the problem. We don't have the HTML portion. Data tab needs to be in here, right, Oscar? So you did all the JavaScript right, but you forgot the HTML. So then if we do that, we hit run. You can now see all the nulls go away and we gain our data tabs. Great question, Oscar. Hopefully that helps. Okay. Christian says, this .content assigned the value of new content. This .content gets instantiated to a variable, but return new link doesn't. I was wondering what this expression does. This .content assigned new content is not initiated to a variable. It's an object, right? We just looked at that, Christian. So that is not an object. I want to make sure you understand that. We got this. That is, or it's not a variable. It's a full-on object. And the same thing is occurring with link. Link is becoming a full-on object with all these methods. So it's the exact same thing going on down here. So we're returning a new object back to the DOM. Okay, Marina says, so on the line 10, we are creating new smart content div. On what line are we returning it to the page? So on line 10, okay. So, oh, you're saying this line, okay. So on this line, we have an object that we can access. We're not returning it to the page until this return gets, so this return is happening at the very end here. I wonder if we can put this whole thing in Python tutor. Let's see if we can do that. Watch this thing happen. So Python tutor, tutor allows us to walk through each thing, visualize our code. Let's see if it'll let us do it. Sweet. Oh, this is step 1 of 1. Oh, it doesn't like my comments. Okay, let me go see if I can quickly get rid of comments here. This would be fun to walk through if we can. So we'll get rid of all these, all these, all these. Kind of fun to see how little code we're actually writing once you get rid of all the comments, right? I mean, there's still a lot of code, but pretty interesting to see. Okay, so we'll grab this, go into our visualization tool, see if we can visualize this. Still not going to let us, dang it, probably because of the DOM's missing. Doesn't have the HTML. Too bad. So Python Tutor allows you to visualize execution of code. So like, for example, if we wanted to go look at closures or something fun, go do that really quick. This might be fun just to look at together. Just to give you another tool in your toolkit. Let's see, collections, Web18 guided, JavaScript 2. Let's go grab our kingdom example. Throw this in here, bring it in. Get rid of this stuff. Okay. Python Tutor, visualize. There we go. So it's 17 steps, kind of cool. So it walks through, it says global frame kingdom. We can go to the next step, and it shows us where we're going, and shows you like how the compiler gets undefined. Then you can see the output up here. And so you just go through. You can see the arrow where it's going to compile next. Pretty cool, right? It just shows you every line of code. Anyway, Python Tutor is awesome. So if you want to look at it, there you go. All right, that's a total side note, but I think it's great. So coming back to components. With Marina's question, the answer is on the return. Everything gets returned, and that's it. Like at the end of this return statement, that's it. Because remember, this is terminal. So nothing happens after this. So we are returning our newly created objects here. Maybe this is annoying, but like that's really what's going on, Marina. Cool. I think that's a great question. Oh man, there's the sticker. Apparently some students wanted a sticker. And even, I also heard that there is a limited edition t-shirt you can buy. All proceeds will go to our charity, not our charity, it's like our nonprofit side that helps people get laptops and everything. So it's all for charity, which I think is great. Okay, so if we come back here, silly me, rookie mistake. Oscar, I don't think that was a rookie mistake. I appreciate you sharing your code with us because it showed us that we needed the HTML tabs. So Oscar, don't feel bad. I think that was really smart. New turns into object, give it brains. Yes, that's how I think about it, Chad. I always think about like the dumb div that can't do anything. And then we just, inject it with some brains by saying new. And this gives us the ability to remake the dumb div with more abilities, which we saw really nicely here. Okay, I think I've caught up to the questions thread. At this juncture, let me go over the assignment for those of you that are feeling good, and then I'll take any time that you guys want. So with components, with our project today, components 2, we have a tab creator. Then you might be going, we just walked through a tab navigator. And I'm going, not like this one. This is different. So this one has some of the abilities that you were wanting to see, and you've got to figure them out. So HTML preview. Okay, so you can see like right out of the gate, you get this drop down and it's got these tab navigators. and with links and everything, and on states and off states. So what I mean by that is these are things we have not talked about, but you should be able to do with the knowledge you have from this guided project. So there's going to be a drop-down menu that's just another review of like toggling a class off and on. I just can't get enough of that stuff. It's really good. But then we have a tab navigator where we can go through, loop through everything, iterate through all the DOM objects, and return smart tabs. So you'll have tab 1, 2, 3, and 4. And by the end, you should be able to click through these tabs. Let me show you the end result. Let's see here. I won't show you the code. I'll just show you the working version. Tab, components, there you are. Okay, so the final result will look like this. Notice it's different, right? It's got like the tab navigator thing, but it's got an active state, and it's got a reset which tab it's on. Notice there's no tabs at the bottom. So it's truly a tab navigator. So that's going to be your challenge this afternoon in the dropdown. If you can do this, you can do the sprint challenge. If you can't do this, it's a great opportunity to find out what you need to work on before you get to the sprint challenge. This is a good gate between this and the sprint challenge. Sprint challenge has a little wrinkle in it, of course, but it's very similar. Okay, that is the project. Make sure you follow all the instructions in the README file. Like, read them very carefully. There's not like any gotchas. It's just if you don't read them, you're going to get wrecked. And that is your assignment. If you're feeling good about your assignment, you're free to go. And I'll answer any questions for anybody that wants to stay. And I may have some banjo to play for you because I don't think we have a Q&A tomorrow. Okay. Let me go to the questions thread and see if there's anything we're missing. Let's see. Silly me, rookie mistake. Got you using the drop down. Okay. Isn't the drop down just like the menu from yesterday? Yes. But read the code. Read the code. Make sure you read the code. It's a little bit different, Mary. It's not like a trick. I'm just saying. It's not the exact same lines of code. Okay. Let me do like a walkthrough of the whole system again. So step one, like in our walkthrough here, is the HTML's got to have data dash on it, right? So data dash tab. Well, step one is grabbing the DOM elements, but now that it's complete, let's be real here. You've got to have data dash tab on the HTML or it won't work. Like that's step one. Step two, come down here, select every element on the DOM, and get it stored. Step three, loop through every single one of these. And now this is where, this is kind of the crux of how this whole thing works, is we're using the return keyword and we're getting a new link. And recall that new creates a new object, right? Giving it brains, like I like to say. Then we come up to link. Link receives the link. So if I'm going to draw it, it's going to look like this. The tab goes into link. We then store the tab in this little placeholder. We then have the content, which is hidden, right? It's displayed none. We're referencing the content here. The thing is, to know which content piece, because remember there's 3 plus contents with this one that are below this. So we've got to figure out, well, which one are we on, right? The way we find out which one we're on is we look at the data attribute in tab 1, which is 1, and the data attribute, which is in tab content, which is 1, and we match them. And we do that on this line right here. So this line right here is matching link data tabs with its selector. Now that we know which ones are link and which ones are content, we're prepared to now make a new content component. And that goes down here and runs its code. If you recall, what do? We have the ability to toggle off and on, basically, our display. So we're just giving this ability now that didn't exist before, right? The div itself was dumb, didn't have any ability. Now we're making it smart, giving it some method. Now that this thing's smarter, we can add an event listener to the tab. So let's get rid of some of these crazy lines. Scroll down a little bit here so we can see both in action. All right, so now this has a tab that needs to be, a link, that needs to be clicked. So that's what that is. When it's clicked, we then say, okay, remember the tab content that we were waiting for? That's this thing down here. I want you to toggle its method. So if we were to draw lines, it would look like this. Click goes here, goes down here, goes down here, which toggles this. And that's what's happening. So there you go. That's the walkthrough of how these things are working. Michael says, we are running a processor on our project today, right? And the answer is yes, you are. Preprocessor, I should say. Because remember, preprocessors are CSS. They're not associated with JavaScript in that way. They're their own thing. So if we minimize these classes, you can see we're creating a link component, a content component, and we're just referencing them on the DOM. Nick says, so classless has a remove as a thing in addition to toggle. Yes, you can do remove, add, but removing and adding only do one thing. Whereas toggle will toggle the class off and on. But I see what you're saying. Okay, any other questions? This is the drop down. I think I've answered all the questions I've seen. Okay, at this point, if I don't see any questions, I'll stop the recording. See ya.